Hello, Judd.
We meet again.
Yes, I can see you. Yes,
There
I
we
can see
go.
you now.
How are you?
I'm very good. Oh, wow. What a beard you have.
I'm trying to get to your level of beard.
You are at my level, I think. You're even
my
beating me
family,
now.
my family's enraged about it. They're like, trim that shit down, but I
Don't cut it.
refuse. No, this is it. This is the future.
Are you good?
I'm doing well. I'm just some of our publicity is slowing down. We've been working really hard, trying to get people to watch the movie, and it seems like it's doing well. We got really, really good reviews, and
Yeah.
it seems like a lot of people are watching it, and the brush fire of our film has begun.
The box office is good because it's a new, it's pretty stressing, I guess, to have a film released directly in VOD like that.
Well, it's just the kind of a new thing because anyone could watch it at any time of the day. Someone's bored at 7 a.m. and they're just stuck in isolation. They could just hit a button. So I think it's great that it's just accessible now, and it's slowly being released around the world. In some countries, it's in the movie theaters.
I know in France it's in movie theaters, which is amazing because it's usually the opposite. We have the American comedies in VOD directly, and this time we have it in theaters.
Do you think people will go? Is the question.
I do think people will go, yes, because it's summer. It's movie theaters are just reopened. There aren't that many movies. The movie's good.
Yes.
The movie's great. So I hope they will
excellent.
go.
Thank you. I know there's a gallery thing here. Oh wow, that changes everything, doesn't it?
Yes. First of all, I'd like you to tell me. I know you've told it a lot, but how did you meet Pete Davidson? And I know it's thanks to Amy Schumer, right?
Yes, I met Pete when we did Trainwreck. He did a cameo. Basically, we were in pre-production, and I said, who should I know? Who's funny? And she said, there's this kid, Pete Davidson. He's 20 years old, and it's ridiculous how funny he is already. His father was a firefighter who died on 9/11, and he has a very dark sense of humor. And so we gave him this small moment in Trainwreck, mainly because we just thought, I think this kid's gonna be a huge star, and it'll be funny that he was in Trainwreck for 20 seconds, which we do sometimes. Like Bo Burnham is in Funny People. Mindy Kaling has a cool part in The 40-Year-Old Virgin. We always want to plant our flag, like Jonah Hill in The 40-Year-Old Virgin. And so we did that, and then we just thought he's great. And Bill Hader recommended him instantly to Saturday Night Live, and he got it. And we worked on another script for a while, which was a very silly script. And it was an idea I gave him, and it didn't really work out. And we were a little frustrated. We didn't know what to do. I still believed in Pete. And then they started telling me about another idea they were trying to figure out, which was something about his mom and how his mom had sacrificed so much of her life to take care of him. And their thought was that he wanted to do a movie about trying to get a man for his mom. More of a raucous comedy. And I said, I don't think that is the right idea. I think if she dated someone, you wouldn't like him. And wouldn't be the worst person she could date be a firefighter. And wouldn't that force you to deal with all the issues that you don't want to deal with? And then we started having conversations about, are you comfortable exploring this? And then we spent some time talking, almost like like a journalistic interview. I spent weeks just asking him about his life and his choices and how losing his dad affected him and his family. And from that information, we slowly started outlining this movie.
And then you pushed him writing the script, as you do with all your alumni, by telling them you have to write a good drama, right? And the jokes will come afterwards.
Absolutely. We wanted to, write a great story. And I didn't know how Pete would be funny because he isn't like other people I've worked with. He's not like Seth Rogen or Amy Schumer, who speak in jokes. They speak in comedic language. And Pete is much more of a character-driven comedic actor. It's not about witticisms. It's rarely about a great line. It really is behavior. So it took me a while to understand how to make him funny in what is really a serious story.
You've always alternated between very personal movies that relate to your own experiences, like Knocked Up, Funny People, This Is 40, and movies that you don't directly write or you co-write, like The 40 Years Old Virgin, Trainwreck, King of Staten Island, which relate to the experience of somebody else. Is there a difference for you in these two kinds of projects, or is it just exactly the same whether you write the script or not?
Every situation is different. Sometimes I feel like I'm mining my own life while also fictionalizing something. You know, for instance, when we did This Is 40, some of it is taken from my life experience, my family. Some of it is taken from Paul Rudd's experiences. Then it's just the observation of all of our friends, and then that becomes a soup. And in a way, The King of Staten Island is similar. You know, Pete has his life experience, but he's also creating a fictional story that could get to some sort of emotional truth. And I feel like sometimes even the movies that I don't write, just in how I produce and how I guide the writing process, I'm digging deep in how I advise. Obviously, I'm trying to steer people in the direction of a type of story that I like to do. I like when people dig deep, and when movies are about how hard life is and what it takes for us to learn lessons. Sometimes you have to take a real beating to learn a lesson. So in Funny People, he has to get cancer to begin to wake up about how lonely he is and how selfish his life is. And that's probably a common aspect to my movies. This movie was different because for years, I've been trying to write a movie about sacrifice. That was the word that kept coming into my mind. I wanted to write about people who were willing to put themselves at risk for others. I wrote a film about returning soldiers from Afghanistan with a friend that we didn't make or haven't made yet. I started writing a movie about a group of newly released prisoners who are trying to adjust to the real world. And I was just trying to go outside of my box. And then when I met Pete and he talked about his dad and how difficult it is for a family to get over that kind of loss, I thought, oh, this is what I was preparing for. I was preparing to write about this sacrifice of this firefighter and about a young man's difficulty understanding why anyone was willing to do that.
Yeah, I feel like this movie is just as personal as the other ones. It's exactly your box. You put the sacrifice concept indeed, but the rest is just as all your other movies, which is great, I think. Like, for example, the movie is named King of Staten Island, and I know you grew up in Long Island, in the suburbs of New York, for those who don't know, and Staten Island is a borough of New York, of course. And I was wondering if you had the same relationship with the city by growing up in Long Island and in and Pete Davidson growing up in Staten Island.
I think I probably did. I lived about almost an hour away from Manhattan, and as a kid growing up on Long Island, which is probably it's both blue collar and a little less blue collar than Staten Island. Yeah. There's probably more upper middle class and lower upper class areas on Long Island, as well as working class. And the city was a place you would just go to see theater. You know, once a year you might go to a Broadway show. And that was about it for most of my childhood till I turned about 15, when I could go on my own and explore a little bit. And I used to go to comedy clubs. There was one club called Caroline's that was near Madison Square Garden. At the time, it was a very small supper club. So you would eat dinner there, and there would be a show, and I think it held about 90 people. And in 1983 and 84, I saw people like Jerry Seinfeld there and Pee Wee Herman. And it was a magical place for me because you didn't have to be drinking age to get in. It was my first taste of the adult world. And I think for Pete on Staten Island, he said, you know, you'd go a whole year without going to Manhattan, and it's literally a 20-minute ferry ride away. It's right there. You're literally staring at it all day. And I think that a lot of people didn't know if they could succeed outside of Staten Island. That as a young person, he felt like for some people that their dreams were limited. There was an enormous amount of hope that you would conquer the big city. And that's part of what the movie's about, that there are these kids and they're struggling and they're working class and they're playing it safe. They're selling drugs and they don't believe that anything is possible.
The movie felt maybe your most melancholic one. It reminded me some episodes of Freaks and Geeks. In the mood. I'm thinking, like, for example, Dead Dogs and Gym Teachers, the one that you famously directed. How did you reach this level of roughness is the word that comes to mind?
I think the location and the vibe of it, how Pete and Dave Cyrus, our co-writer, explained it, let me know how it should feel. And I did think a lot about Freaks and Geeks when we were making the movie, because there is a sadness to Pete that you notice even when he's standing there and doing nothing. When we started scouting, we would go to each location and I brought a camera and I would just take a picture of him, sitting in a bar, sitting in a restaurant. And he always looked sad. He always looked like there was something on his mind. And I thought, he looks like a silent film star. There's a Buster Keaton type of feeling all the time. And these photos, which were just like, hey, Pete, stand there, click. I wasn't asking him to have an emotion, but I felt everything about Pete in these photographs. Some of them I just put on Instagram the other day. And that's how you feel on Staten Island. There's something about it energetically. That's why we shot the whole movie there. We didn't try to fake it somewhere else. And we talked a lot about people who just think there's a ceiling to how far they can get in life, especially for somebody like Pete's character, who had a dad who was a hero. And Pete talked a lot about feeling like he could never live up to that he would never do anything that was worthy of being his father's son. And then other people who, in the movie, who just think, this is it. We're just here. This is it. It's not going to get better than this. And I worked with Bob Ellsworth, the great cinematographer who did There Will Be Blood and Boogie Nights. And we tried to shoot it like a Sidney Lumet movie or a Hal Ashby movie. I'm always trying to shoot movies like a Hal Ashby movie. But I think that Bob Ellsworth really understood the type of handheld camera work which would make you feel like you were living this experience of Staten Island.
Yeah, it's funny that you quote that you name Hal Ashby. I mean, it's not funny, it's not surprising because I know your taste, but it really feels a movie from the 70s. I was struck by this.
Yes. Yeah, and we watched those movies, and a bunch of them, Serpico and Dog Day Afternoon. Coming Home is a movie that's shot so beautifully and feels so real and alive. And I've tried to do that in other movies as well. I'm always influenced by Alexander Payne and his camera work. We use Faden Papa Michael, his cinematographer, on This Is 40. But this definitely needed to have a vibe of being stuck. His character is stuck, and only when his mom starts dating another fireman is he challenged about everything. And when the mom tells him, you have to move out in 9 months, he goes into a panic as if she said, you have to move out tomorrow.
Pete Davidson in this movie reminded me of Jason Segel, especially Jason Segel in Freaks and Geeks and Nick Andropoulos. It could be almost as like a sequel of
yes.
6 years later. And I was wondering, after 30 years in the business, how do you find still so much appeal in finding new talents? That's really your focus in your whole career, to find new talents.
I think I'm just a fan of comedy, and when I find a new comedian, for me, it's like finding a new band. You know, when you're a kid and suddenly Pearl Jam comes out and you just get so excited. I remember when the first Nirvana album came out and you lose your mind. And on some level, that's what finding a new comedic voice is to me. And I'm also interested in trying to help them figure out how they can express their visions. So it's fun to collaborate with them because they have so much to say, and it is a puzzle to figure out, well, how does Pete Davidson work as a movie star? What would that be? And so we spent a lot of time rehearsing, doing table reads, and I'm just trying to get a feel of what this movie wants to become, because at some point the movie starts telling you what it needs to be.
Do you still discover music, by the way? New bands?
I do a little bit, but I probably not as much as I should. As I get older, you find that you just want music to calm down. Because life is so stressful. And when you're young, you're like, and you love music that's like, and so believe me, I get super excited when the new Pearl Jam Gigaton album comes out, and there's music I get excited for. The new Who album is really amazing, and I love Jeff Tweedy and Wilco and Radiohead and people like that. But I also, sometimes you just need some Sade or Jack Johnson, to just relax and feel good, and so I'm not always searching that, but I hear most everything through my kids.
Yeah.
So we're in the car, and they find everything. Just people with no record deals we're listening to all the time. Like, I'm like, who's this? I found them on TikTok. And does anyone know them? Nope, no one knows them. And they listen to it like it's the biggest band in the world.
Have you discovered something cool recently during the lockdown, maybe, or?
Well, cinematically, I'm very excited about the third season of Marcella on Netflix. That's a fun show.
Marcella?
Yeah, Marcella. But I don't think, I haven't really watched much because my kids control the television. So we watched this South Korean horror movie called The Wailing together, and it was amazing. And then I thought, well, now we're just going to watch tons of really cool, weird movies. And then, nope, it was all 90 Day Fiancé and RuPaul's Drag Race. It's all reality television. No one will let me watch good movies. And so it's a lot of comfort television.
Can't you watch a movie on your computer at night when everybody sleeps?
I do. I try to sneak something that I want to see in, but there's not that much time. Everybody here seems to want my attention. What's that about?
Is the quarantine over for you? Are you meeting people, going out?
I'd say it's still about 85, 90% what it's been. I'm very careful. I take long walks with friends in the morning. That's really the only thing I'm doing. I visited a friend for the first time the other day, and I walked in their house, and it was like a guy landing on the moon. I couldn't have been stranger. I think they all looked at me like I was crazy. It was a group of people who were isolated, and I'm the only one entering with a mask. And I thought, oh, I'm the one that's going to ruin them. And so I quickly left.
Since Donald Trump was elected almost 4 years ago, do you think that the way of making comedy has changed? Is it still possible to make the same jokes now that this nightmare is going on?
I try to assume that you can do it the same way. I try to think I can do it the same way I've always done it. Yeah. I can't think about all of that too much. Every once in a while, there's a joke someone might say, yeah, I don't think you can do that kind of joke anymore, but it's pretty rare. For me, in the movies, it all comes from character. And every once in a while, a character like Pete's character will say something that's kind of awful. But in my head, I just think, well, that's what that character would say, which is different than me personally, going on a talk show, making a joke, speaking my opinion. And I do think that the truth is what my friend Colin Quinn, who played Amy Schumer's dad in Trainwreck, always says, which is, you can say whatever you want as long as you mean it. You can't be sloppy now. You have to have an opinion, and if it's really your opinion and you're not just saying it to be goofy, then you can stand firmly behind it. I think people get in trouble sometimes in stand-up comedy because they want to be sloppy and they want to explore. And they want the audience to understand that dynamic, that they might make mistakes, they might step over the line, they might say something offensive, and that's part of the exploration for them when they're writing their act in a comedy club. You know, with a movie, I think the bigger issue is, will studios support movies which challenge the status quo? Would a studio spend $20-30 million on a movie that challenged how countries behave, how corporations behave? And I think that's the tragic part, is probably way less than they would have in the past because they have such deep financial ties to a lot of bad people.
Do you have an example of what you're saying? I'm not sure to
Well, there's a lot of people in the United States who are afraid to speak up about how Muslims are treated in China. So you won't see people speak out and say, what's happening in these re-education camps? And are they really taking people in the middle of the night and sending them to re-education camps just because they're Muslim? And obviously that is something that is happening. We know it's happening. And you won't see major media companies allow it to be discussed as often as it should be discussed. And I think that's true for the behavior of a lot of different countries, that they may be investors, or they may be people who buy weapons, and so there's just there's a quiet complicity to take their money and not care enough about human rights abuses. We have the same thing with Saudi Arabia.
You usually don't write very political jokes. I mean, in the sense of addressing the politicians directly. You did it very famously, though, in 2011 at the dinner of Correspondence, the White House. You wrote some jokes for Barack Obama. It's kind of famous here in the US, but not many people know that in France. But you wrote the joke that destroyed Donald Trump in front of everybody when he was into the birther conversation with Obama. And later on, Trump said that it drove him to want to run for president. And I know you've discussed this subject a little bit with some journalists here in the US. But I was wondering first, how do you remind this event? How was it for you? And when you look back at it now, would you do it exactly the same if you had to do it now again? This kind of jokes.
Well, basically, for people who don't know the story, there's a dinner every year in the United States where the president does stand-up comedy, basically, for all of the journalists. And at this time in 2011 was the beginning of the birther movement, where Donald Trump was questioning whether or not Barack Obama was born in the United States. And you're not allowed to be the president unless you were born in the United States. And it was a very racist thing to do. There was also some rumblings that Trump was considering running for president. And I helped out writing jokes, and I wrote a few jokes, which the point of the jokes were that Donald Trump should not be president. He's a game show host, and that would be crazy.
All kidding aside, obviously we all know about your credentials and breadth of experience. For example, no, seriously, just recently in an episode of Celebrity Apprentice at the steakhouse, the men's cooking team did not impress the judges from Omaha Steaks. And there was a lot of blame to go around, but you, Mr. Trump, recognized that the real problem was a lack of leadership. And so ultimately you didn't blame Little John or Meatloaf. You fired Gary Busey. And these are the kind of decisions that would keep me up at night.
In addition to the jokes that the president did about Donald Trump, Seth Meyers hosted and did a lot of jokes that night about how Donald Trump shouldn't be the president. Donald Trump never said that's why he ran for president. That's something that some people thought because he was so humiliated. But clearly, he had been dancing around running for president for a long time, and then 5 years later, he ran for president. I don't think that they're connected in any way. Obviously, he is a racist who hated our president because he's black. I'm sure that's one of the reasons. I don't think it was just that he got that he was humiliated that night. The truth is, I'm sure there have been many nights where people have made fun of Donald Trump to his face. And he was already the driver of the birtherism movement. So what he was doing was as awful and angry and cruel and dishonest as it could be. So he was already in gear at that time. When I was working on the speech, I said, I don't like Donald Trump and I think we should go harder at him. And I stand behind that because I had an instinct that this would be the worst person to ever lead our country. And as a humorist, we should mock him. He's a terrible person. And I think he turned out to be 1,000 times worse than my worst dreams of how a person could behave. I mean, to have a president trying to get people not to wear masks is basically getting thousands of additional people killed. That's who the man is. He only cares about himself and his personal power. And he's a very dangerous person. And now an enormous amount of people are dying as a result of his bad choices and his political choices, which he knows leads to death. He knows what he's doing. So I look back at it like, in a small way, I tried to say this would be a nightmare. And I wish that the country realized who he was. To me, it seemed very obvious. And even at this point, 40% of our country has not turned on him. And it doesn't make much sense to me. And I find it very, very troubling.
They will never turn on him, those 40%. They will.
It's very hard to understand. And it says a lot about human nature and who we are as a species. Obviously, there's a lot of tribalism. A lot of people don't want to admit that they're wrong. And, this is how the most tragic events of societies happen. And we see it now in the United States and things like this happen around the world. And there's an enormous amount of loss of life as a result of people supporting autocrats. But we have an election in November, and I'm hopeful that is what will happen. I don't think he's gained any fans. He must have lost. Say he only lost 10%. Well, he lost by 3 million votes. Last time, we just have a strange system with an electoral college that allowed him to slip through. But I don't think he'll slip through again. It would be shocking. And it would only happen due to some sort of corruption and voter suppression.
But he's going to try to disrupt the election again for sure. And the next 5 months are going to be crazy. This is going to be a crazy campaign for sure.
I think so. And only people turning out in numbers higher than they ever have before can you guarantee that he won't find a way to stay in office. But he also seems very unhealthy. Something's clearly happening to him. And I also, would hope that if he was not well enough to be the president, that he would step down.
What are you working on next? This Afghanistan movies, something else, or the project production?
I'm doing a pilot with Ricky Velez, who plays Oscar in the movie, Pete's best friend in the movie. So we're doing an HBO show that hopefully we'll get to shoot when they allow us to shoot. And I'm overseeing a lot of projects. I'm about to produce a movie starring Billy Eichner, a gay rom-com that Nick Stoller, who directed Forgetting Sarah Marshall, wrote with him and is directing. And that was right about to start shooting when we had to shut down. So hopefully we'll get that going again. All right. Well, take care, Jackie. Be well. Stay healthy.
You too. Bye-bye. See you soon.
All right. Take care. See ya.